Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the UN Water Seminar on the Water Energy Nexus. It's a pleasure to have you all here in the afternoon. And since this session is being webcast, I also welcome those of you who are joining us online. My name is Zafar Adil. I'm the director of United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health based in Canada. And I will be your moderator for this session today. We have an exciting panel that will take us through a whole range of issues around water energy nexus. And we also have some interesting teasers from the World Water Development Report that we will be sharing with you this afternoon. The report comes out next year, but we already have some, as I said, interesting teasers that we share with you. To start off the conversation, I would like to invite Mr. Bert DePoon from UN Habitat to give some opening remarks. He serves as the Vice Chair of UN Water, which, as many of you know, is a collaboration mechanism amongst 30 UN organizations, agencies. So, Bert, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. I'm very honored that you give me the floor in my capacity as Vice Chair UN Water. Okay, World Water Day, the themes is a very important activity for UN Water. It is really one area where we have made tremendous progress over the last years. We do celebrate World Water Day in a specific city, a host city, and we run specific events, but we also have a very active website and where we post background documentation, and we see now that World Water Day is now being celebrated all over the world, being at schools, being at universities, being at provinces and so on, local authorities. So that makes this whole campaign a very, very strengthful event, and so therefore we're also very careful in selecting our themes. And but this one, water and energy, of course, is very, very, very relevant. We also have to thank the Stockholm CIVI, the organizers. We have a memorandum of understanding with them that they will align this theme of their from the Water Week with the theme of the UN World Water Day, and they allow us to. There's also a tradition that we have one first seminar ahead of next year, and that's the one we are talking about today. That really sets the tone and provides and gives receives the first input from the participants, allowing also CIVI to further sharpen their program for next year. So that's the idea. So this one is a sort of testing ground to see what are the relevant topics. I know that Torkel and his team, the scientific committee, have already elaborated very much on this area. I was happy to get a teaser from Rick. Rick is we know each other for a long time, and I told him what are the main issues, what are we talking about, and then he showed me the demand for energy, how much that will increase, and it was shocking. And I don't want to use your figure; you're going to present your figures yourself. But it was also very shocking to see that although we may talk about biofuels, we may talk about sustainable energy, that it will remain a very small portion of the whole energy demand. And at the end of the day, it will be coal, it will be gas, and so on. That will be rely on. So it means that we should maybe also not only have a better understanding between the energy guys and the water people, but that we also have the people from climate change there, because these are enormous repercussions there. So maybe we should think about not only about water and energy, maybe we should again have a nexus as well, say water, energy, and climate change, and add that as an important element. So that was my first reaction. Of course, UN Habitat, we are being presented here as my agency. We are the cities agency. We all know urbanization takes place at an enormous rate, and the people will live in cities, and cities are the consumers of both energy and water. So the integration is very much relevant for cities. And so, Adil, you have done so far already. You have done a great job by getting all these people here, and I'm also confident that you are an excellent moderator for your panel. And on behalf of UN Water, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bert, and you've certainly set the tone and to some extent, the agenda of what we are to discuss in terms of the range of issues. So thank you very much again. What I would like to do is to start with an overview of some of the issues that we're going to tackle, as well as give you a brief overview of what the planning is for the World Water Day at this point in time. So I'll just move over there. So the topic for the seminar, as well as for the World Water Day next year, will be the nexus between water and energy. And this is a joint venture that United Nations University and UNIDO, the UN Industrial Development Organization, will be taking on behalf of the UN community as a whole. And we will also be in partnership with the World Water Assessment Program, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So thematically, there's a whole range of issues that we can look at, and Bert has just mentioned some of them. In terms of energy generation, there are very close links with water. Obviously, for hydropower, water is quite crucial, but also in terms of thermal and nuclear energy, proximity to water resources, and sometimes impacts from energy generation on water resources are quite obvious. And as we focus more and more on renewables, there's again a footprint of those in terms of water footprint of those approaches. Similarly, more recently, when we've started discussing access to energy, many of you would know the issues that surround, and sometimes the controversy that surrounds, shale gas and fracking opportunities. And similarly, for biofuels, there's a very heated debate going on in terms of the relationship with energy generation through biofuels and the impact on water resources. When you invert that equation and look at how water treatment and supply and distribution are linked to energy resources, globally we know that about 8% of the global energy consumption is for treating water, for supplying, pumping it to where it's needed. It also is the quantity and the quality of that water is also connected to the energy sector, sometimes perhaps negatively in terms of the chemical and thermal pollution to water resources. And there is also an interesting case that we will discuss in a bit more depth in the panel discussion, is the co-production of water and energy, most particularly in the case of geothermal options which are available. So I'm trying not to go into details of any of these issues because we have a very distinguished panel that will walk us through those. What is important to remember is that there is an increasing demand for both water and energy, and those demands are going to be significant, and they will increase as a result of climate change as we move forward. There's also now, as you've seen in many of the sessions here, a very heated discussion and dialogue around the post-2015 agenda, and more specifically around the development of sustainable development goals and how they link to water-related goals and targets. But around that whole debate around the post-2015 development agenda, there's a number of links that we can explore further. Water and energy security are quite critical, and there's a bit of a geographic overlap. We know, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, energy availability is low, and water availability is also low. And that happens in many developing regions of the world. There's a link with the notion of green economy, and particularly when we talk about robust and climate-resilient economic growth, you have to take into account this nexus between water and energy. And similarly for gender inequities, we find that, again, similar type of inequities come into play, and in many developing countries, women spend an inordinate amount of time fetching not only water, but also burning wood for cooking. And again, those inequities need to be addressed as part of the overall post-2015 agenda. There are development links as well in terms of looking at empowering economic opportunities, creation of new jobs, and eventually using those as levers to reduce poverty. And again, having water and energy is a critical element of those strategies. Similarly, creation of policy incentives we need to have this kind of cross-linkage between water and energy policies, and that's absolutely crucial to move forward. And finally, in terms of implementation, one of the points that we've looked at over the last few years is this notion of bottom billion. These are the billion people who are without access to energy or modern forms of energy. They're also typically don't have access to clean and safe water and don't have access to sanitation. And the point is that from their perspective, it's actually very useful to go in and provide these resources all at the same time rather than parceling it out one at a time. And of course, there is a big focus on increasing efficiency in both water and energy generation as well as its delivery to the consumers. And in order to achieve all of this, there's a need for engagement with stakeholders. And again, there's a fairly broad range that goes from the industrial manufacturing sector, power sector, and I wouldn't call water as a sector, but the international water community has to be engaged, civil society organizations, academic and research community, and of course, not the least, international development partners and donors also need to be plugged into the equation. So this sort of gives you a thumbnail sketch of the kind of issues that are at play. And these will be discussed at the World Water Day event, which are UN Water has a main event in one location, but they're actually spread out across the world. I'm quite pleased to also reveal, perhaps for the first time, the logo that has been designed for the World Water Day, and it's a nice overlap of energy waves and a water droplet. So this you will be seeing a lot of between now and the World Water Day next year. Let me briefly introduce the components of this World Water Day. The most prominent objective of World Water Day is to raise awareness on these water energy linkages. We hope that that discussion contributes to the overall policy dialogue, which should cover a whole range of issues, and I just pointed out some of those. There's also a need for actively engaging the various stakeholders inside of those discussion boxes. And at the end of the day, we need to be able to demonstrate to decision makers, policymakers, politicians, that these integrated approaches where you take into account this water energy nexus more explicitly, you can actually have a bigger impact in terms of social and economic benefits that you get at the end of the day. We will also focus on the policy dimension and look at how policy formulation can take place to enhance the implementation around water energy nexus. And at the same time, we also know many developing countries don't have the resources for implementing those, and hence capacity development becomes a pretty central element of that. And I've already talked about how these link back to the 2015, post-2015 development agenda. And again, we will make an effort to take the messages from various World Water Day events and funnel them back into that dialogue. We will also focus on presenting the findings from the United Nations World Water Development Report, and we will later on give you a teaser from what's in that report, which is also focusing on this linkage between water and energy. And finally, we want to, as UN Water, we want to strengthen the engagement and cooperation across the UN agencies and organizations. And as many of you who are familiar with UN Water would know, that that cooperation is not just limited to the UN system itself, but it's actually expanded to include quite a broad range of players and stakeholders. And we're quite interested that how UN Water collaborates with UN Energy, which is also a similar global coordination mechanism in the UN system. What are the elements of this campaign, I would like to call it? We see this as an opportunity for engaging globally on these issues of water and energy. And we meaning UN Water, provides support to worldwide events. We offer a platform on which you can advertise. You can try to engage people through this platform. We provide promotional and informational materials, which include advocacy guide, posters, fact sheets, graphics, etc. So there's a whole range of tools that are available for those who are interested in organizing events in their own neighborhood or in their own communities. And what we've seen over the last few years, that the numbers of events and numbers of people who are engaging through this mechanism has grown logarithmically, and so there's an increasing number of events and people who are engaged. Another successful element we had this year was to have an international competition for identifying a slogan for the World Water Day. Again, it's a great tool for engaging particularly youth in this dialogue and to identify what general perceptions are around a particular issue. There's a World Water Day website, which is also maintained by UN Water, and it offers information in multiple languages. There's also a social media campaign that UN Water undertakes, and this online community has also been growing very significantly. As you can see from the numbers here, there are 34,000 likes on Facebook, 12,000 followers on Twitter, and about 7,000 people who receive the UN Water newsletter. So there's a very large footprint on the social media that takes place. And of course, we don't ignore the traditional media, and again, the UN agencies that are involved in these processes collaborate, and together with our international partners, we take the messages forward to the traditional media as well. The main World Water Day event will be in Tokyo next year, and this will be on 20th and 21st of March, so we're doing it a day ahead of the actual celebrated World Water Day, which falls on a Saturday. So the festivities will actually continue through the World Water Day. Let me share with you briefly a sketch of what we are intending to do. On 20th March, there will be two major workshops. One will focus on the Asia-Pacific region and look at what scientific and research issues are there. We will bring in various stakeholders from the region and again try to bring out the same series of issues that I just touched on, and how do they play out in that regional context. We're also planning a capacity development workshop for journalists, and in the past we found such an exercise to be really useful because journalists are often not very familiar with these specific topics, and by introducing them to various thematic issues, providing them advocacy and guidance materials, we find that their capacity is built quite significantly, and we do this through a series of interactive dialogues. There will be a main event on 21st of March where we will start with a high-level policy dialogue. There will also be a number of working-level dialogues. As I hinted at, the World Water Development Report, which focuses on this water energy nexus, will be launched in Tokyo. And we will, as usual, have some artistic depiction through music, through dance, through photography and art exhibitions on where these connections between water and energy play out. And we're also aiming to have a technology exhibition. As you can imagine, in Japan, there's a very high focus and interest on technologies, and we're hoping that that will be enhanced by bringing in other international partners and players to display their technologies in this arena. As is the tradition for World Water Day events, we will also announce the Water for Life Award, which recognizes best practices around the world. It's an award that is given out by UN Water. And also the laureate for the Stockholm Water Prize is also traditionally announced at the World Water Day. So we're looking forward to that as well. So what is it that we want to achieve by doing all these activities, not just in Tokyo, but across the world? We want to identify the linkages between the scientific work and research and policy, and how do we use those to move forward and to address where the gaps lie at the moment. And we're planning to produce a policy brief which will extract this information and which will be based on the two dialogues that I mentioned in Tokyo in particular. And in fact, the discussions that we are to have this afternoon are also going to be quite directly contributing to that. We want to mobilize a stakeholder dialogue. So the World Water Day event is not an end in itself, but it's actually a continuation of this discussion moving forward. We also want, particularly being in the UN system, to identify what the capacity needs are and perhaps catalyze action to meet those needs as we move forward. And we think that UN Water can play a very significant role in meeting those. And finally, from UN Water, we want to synthesize messages and also take actions that propel us forward. And as you heard from Bert, that the World Water Week next year will focus on the same topic. So we hope that some of our messages will be carried forward to here in Stockholm, and we will have a follow-up dialogue here as well. So that's all I had in terms of the content. I do want to mention again the partners that we have so far in this coalition, United Nations University, my particular Institute on Water, Environment and Health, UNIDO, UNESCO, the World Water Assessment Program, the Japanese government, particularly the Ministry of Infrastructure, the University of Tokyo, and we also have City of Kumamoto, which is the winner of this year's Water for Life Award, is also coming on board as a partner. So we're hoping to look forward to see you all, not just in Tokyo, but around the world. So thank you very much for your attention. So we have a tradition that each year a UN agency takes the role of playing the host for World Water Day. This year, the focus was on international water cooperation, and UNESCO led the charge with that. So let me invite Blanca to come up and say a few words about the achievements for the World Water Day this year, and also to pass on the baton to UNU and UNIDO. So, Blanca, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Adil. As I am still new for a lot of people, let me introduce myself. I'm Blanca Jimenez. I'm the Secretary of the International Hydrological Program and the Director of the Division of Water Science at UNESCO. I was just realizing now that this World Water Day was the 20th. And it started from being an event organized by all the UN agencies together, now by being organized by some agencies on behalf of UN Water. I think that as UN we have moved and we have really show that we can first collaborate in the UN system, and that we have managed to mobilize the people. So this day, UNESCO was in charge of organizing this day on behalf of UN Water in collaboration with UNECE and UNDESA. In our case, the day took place on the 22 March, which is the official date for the World Water Day, and it was held in The Hague. But at the same time, we had a high-level interactive dialogue with the 67th session of the UN General Assembly in New York. I think that was very important because we really were linked to policymakers and politicians from the whole country. As was mentioned, the theme for us was cooperation, and still this event is part of this International Year Water of Cooperation. And to summarize in some figures what we have achieved, we have 3 different web pages. The UNESCO web page that it was presented in the 6 official UN languages. A UN Waters web page that has had more than 60,000 visitors only for that day, and the Dutch government web page. We have 30,000 followers in the Facebook, more than 10,000 followers in Twitter, more than 200,000 views of the YouTube videos that we have. At the day, we have 421 participants in The Hague, and around the world, more than 800 events took place around the World Water Day. These events were very, very different. It went from theaters, performances, to graffitis, using this idea of displaying through graffiti water. I think it's something that was really very interesting to realize. And walks for water. People were carrying water for 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, and that happened in different countries, not only in Europe. We had that in The Hague, but it happened in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Thinking, try to think as UNESCO, what was important for us. I think it was indeed a very gratifying task because two reasons. First, because we were celebrating the World Water Day, and secondly, because we really managed to show the importance of cooperation. After listening to the plans that UNU and UNIDO have, I think that we are sure that they are going to do very nice work. You know, UNESCO can still cooperate and support you with anything that we could do for help you. And I'm sure that it will be a complete success. And where is Christian? Okay. This symbol, which is also a contribution of UNESCO to UN Water, represents the World Water Day, and we are handling it officially to our colleagues. And please take a look of it. You take it together, but I think you should put in the same. You should cooperate and put it in that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think that we still need to be here for that.
We just leave it.
Please give them another round of applause. Thank you very much. I invite my partner in crime, Mr. Christian Susan from UNIDO, to say a few words on behalf of UNIDO.
Thank you very much, Adele. Well, for UNIDO, it's an honor and a pleasure to cooperate in this important issue with the United Nations University. The key core mandate of UNIDO is to promote green industries. These are industries which sustain economic development, whereas their detrimental impact on the environment and on social structures is minimized. So this decoupling, delinking of growth from resource consumption to make industries more resource efficient. And there can be no industrial process which doesn't involve water or energy. And in this role, our previous Director General, Dr. Candium Keller, acted also as the head, the chair of UNU-INWEH. We are looking forward to this cooperation, and thank you very much, Adele, and see you, everyone. I hope to become active stakeholders and participants in the 2014 events to celebrate World Water Day. It's not a UN event alone, it's an event for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to the exciting part around discussion. So let me invite all the panelists to join us here on the stage. While they're making their way up the stage, let me also share with you the process that we will follow. We will start off by giving each of the panelists the opportunity to make a short intervention for about, I would say, 7-8 minutes. And that will allow us to leave ample time for a very interactive dialogue. And we want all of you to be very much a part of that dialogue as we move forward. What is interesting about this panel is, and I'll introduce each of them as I invite them to offer comments, is that it's actually bringing in a wide range of perspectives and backgrounds. And that helps us enormously in terms of moving forward and in identifying the various range of issues that we need to address. So I will go in the order of the listed panelists. And the first one is Mr. Zelalem Gebrihot. I'm not sure if I'm doing justice to your last name. My apologies for that. But he's with the East African Power Pool. And I would say it would be fair to say you represent the energy sector and its perspectives. So the floor is yours, and we'd like to hear, as I said, for perhaps about 7-8 minutes. Yeah, you can use that one.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good afternoon, everybody. It's indeed a pleasure to speak in front of this panel and, of course, expect a lot to learn from the panel as well and from you at large. Mr. Moderator, let me start by introducing the Eastern Africa Power Pool. Eastern Africa Power Pool is an intergovernmental regional organization established in 2005 through the signing of an intergovernmental memorandum of understanding with 10 Eastern Africa countries. Our members, to name our members, Burundi, Democratic Republic Congo, Egypt, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, Sudan, Uganda, Tanzania, Libya, Ethiopia, and Egypt. The APP is established with a mission for pooling and wheeling of electrical energy resources in a coordinated and optimized manner to enable provision of affordable, sustainable, and reliable electrical energy throughout the region. And the further objective was also to establish electricity market in the long term. At that time, there was a common understanding between the members that the energy deficit in the region can be substantially reduced through greater inter-country electricity trade, and cross-border power sharing at this time has become a strategic priority for all of the Eastern Africa countries, and that is supported by the continental and regional organizations like the Africa Union Commission, the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, Eastern Africa Community, and the New Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD, and among others. And in line with that, the countries in the region years ago have embarked upon the development and operation of power system interconnection projects through bilateral arrangements. To name a few which are now in operation are the Ethiopia-Sudan 230 kV interconnection line and the Ethiopia-Djibouti interconnection line, the cross-border power exchange between Kenya and Ethiopia, and interconnection between Uganda and Kenya, and in the Great Lakes region, Burundi, Eastern DRC, and Rwanda. And the remaining major interconnection projects are expected to be commissioned by on or before 2018. That includes the 1,100 kilometer, 500 kV AC DC line between Ethiopia and Kenya. By the time that line is commissioned, we would have an opportunity to exchange power between 9 of our member countries. And we believe that, in effect, avails the opportunity to develop energy projects which provides least cost power on a sustainable basis, in addition to optimal use of the existing available capacity, and as such opportunity for least cost development of new generation facilities, as well as optimal use of the existing capacity, would entail consideration of the broader water energy nexus at best to ensure sustainability. When we look at the Eastern Africa Power Pool Regional Master Plan published on May 2011, the generation plans which formed the basis of the regional master plan constituted diversified portfolio of generation projects. For example, looking at the generation expansion plan for the year between 2013 and 38, that's a 25 years planning horizon, the proportion of hydropower ranges from a minimum of 4% in one of the member countries, which is Kenya, to 84% in the DRC system. Looking at the whole of the EAPP system, hydropower would constitute only 40% of the total generation capacity by the end of the planning horizon. That is based on the master plan published on May 2011. But this configuration is expected to change in the foreseeable update of the master plan to take place within the next 2 years. And again, that's about the recommended plan for the long term, but whether the recommended power generation projects, especially those beyond the first 5 years, the initial years, are whether they are water smart, is required to be studied further, and the findings to be employed as an input to the future updates of the regional master plan. So as I stated earlier, the EAPP constitutes 10 member countries. The average electricity access at this stage is about 20%, and the average per capita consumption is less than 100 kilowatt per year, which is almost the lowest in the world. That is without considering Egypt. But as confirmed by the various studies, the region is endowed with vast hydropower and geothermal generation potential, which is the two together in the order of 180,000 megawatt capacity yet to be tapped to improve the existing situation. Hydropower constitutes only 30% of the total installed capacity in the existing system, looking at the whole of EAPP as a whole. And it is even, the contribution is less in terms of energy generation capacity. Geothermal in the existing system could be termed insignificant in the order of few hundred megawatts. As the depicted hydro capacity in the existing system represents 9% of the economically developed potential in the region, it's rational to expect significant hydropower and other renewable resource development in the region to improve the future generation mix as well as access to modern energy service. As such, this highlights the need to explore the future water energy nexus in the region to guide the required huge energy and water infrastructure expansion in the direction of sustainability. As the power systems are vulnerable to water scarcity and also have impact on water availability to downstream users. Needless to say, hydropower does not consume any water except evaporative losses from the dam. But there is a need to do careful assessment to develop water-smart hydropower dams with less evaporation losses within a regional cooperative framework and provide access to cost-effective power to member countries through interconnected power systems. So we in the Eastern Africa Power Pool, at this stage, all the studies are considering as much renewable energy as possible in the expansion plans, but most of it is basically guided by least cost power development considerations. Mr. Moderator, that's what I have for this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was indeed a very interesting overview of a region where both water and energy issues are quite critical. And I think it also offers us a good segue to the next panelist, Dr. Ingvar Fridlifsson, who's the past director of United Nations University's Geothermal Training Program in Iceland. So, Ingvar, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, I do not need to explain to you that water, of course, is one of the primary needs. Water and air, if we haven't got these, then we wouldn't be living. But then the third factor, which is very important, and that is energy. people used mainly the muscular energy, but gradually we have been able to make use of other types of energy, electricity and the water and so on. So and that is really where energy and water come together. That is in the water energy sector, because in geothermal we are dealing with water also, but some of the water comes out of the ground as steam, and that is fortunately already now providing about 20% of the electricity in Kenya. And there is an enormous potential in the whole of the East Africa Rift Valley, and which we are looking very much forward to seeing the development of, and are participating very much in doing, as I will come to later. But energy consumption is one of the factors that correspond linearly to the growth in energy consumption to the GNP per capita. So this goes hand in hand, development in a country and the energy use in the country, that's to say, because people are getting the machines to work for them. But also there is a very good and linear correspondence between the energy use and the lifetime expectancy, the illiteracy, and energy use, etc. But in my opinion, one of the key issues to discuss in the water energy nexus is capacity building of professionals from the developing countries, where in most developing countries there are very few people who have expert training in this field. And the government of Iceland and the United Nations University established the United Nations Geothermal Training Program in Iceland in 1979. And within the UNU, for UNU fellowships, there are very strict conditions. Number one, the candidates, they must have a university degree and a job within either an energy company or university in a developing country. They must have a permanent job. And when we select them all by private interviews. We go to the countries and we visit the main companies or ministries involved. We visit the facilities, we see the equipment that they have in the laboratories and so on, and go to the geothermal fields. And we select every single fellow by a personal interview. And then those we offer a fellowship, they have to write and sign that they will be working with their company or university for at least 3 years after they get back. And similarly, the company has to sign a certificate that they will be working in geothermal at least for 3 years after the training. Otherwise, we can send an invoice for the training cost. And this has been very, very effective. And we have 9 specialized lanes or lines of training going from geology to hydrology to surface geophysical exploration to downhole geophysical exploration, drilling, engineering, as well as chemistry and environment. And as a matter of fact, the largest group of our students have come from Kenya, 89 out of the 554 graduates. And the second number, highest number is 82 from China. But about half of all our graduates have come from the East Africa Rift Valley. And that is also where we are training and having annual courses for people from the East Africa Rift countries. And I think it is very important in the water energy nexus to apply not only for geothermal, but also for hydro and water, some training mechanism that takes top people who have just started working in the developing countries, take them abroad, away from their office, and train them, and then follow up the training after they get back home. And this is, in Kenya, for instance, the top person of GTC, as well as the technical director of Kengen, both of them were trained in Iceland 20 to 25 years ago. And the tops in almost every specialty with these companies have been trained with us, and we are very proud of this. And the government of Iceland has done the same thing with, had very good cooperation with the United Nations University, and on the 20th anniversary of the geothermal program, a fisheries training program was set up. And they already have about 270 graduates from about 50 countries, developing countries, most of them from Africa, but also quite a lot from Asia. And then on the 10th anniversary of the fisheries training program, 30th anniversary of ours, then the land restoration training program was set up, and the land restoration training program is built in the same way as the geothermal and fisheries, same selection method, and they are working in arid lands, in desert areas. And Adil can tell you more about that than me because he is on the board of directors of that program. But I think that capacity building is perhaps the most important issue. And this is something that we very much need both in the water and in the energy, and even more so in the water, I believe, because of how important water is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ingvar. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your highlighting this need for capacity development, and it's an issue that we will come back to when we go into the discussion mode. Our next panelist doesn't really need any introduction, but I'm very pleased to welcome Torgny Holmgren, the director of Stockholm International Water Institute. Torgny, you have the floor.
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for bringing me to this panel and this most interesting subject, which we will have as a main focus of next year's World Water Week, energy and water. So let me take the freedom to be a panelist to do some speculation towards the end of my intervention, what will happen in the next few years. But I will start off with commenting and reflecting upon common features between energy and water, and also see the asymmetries in water and energy, and see what might happen over the next few years. As has been mentioned here, we know that both energy and water, of course, are basic requirements for human life, food production, for our survival, shelter, etc. So it's very close linkages, as we know, between a correlation between water and energy. Water is needed for energy production and also energy for water supply. So that is common, basic needs for human life. Second, we know that there is a huge increase in demand for both energy and water in the next few years. According to International Energy Agency, the demand for water will, or for energy, of course, will be some 50% higher just 20 years from now. And as we know that OECD has estimation that the water demand will increase by some 55% up to 2050. So it's a huge increase in demand, thanks or due to, if you wish, to growing populations and growing economies. So there is a challenge both in the energy sector and in the water sector to meet that increased demand. So that is also in common. And I also often claim that water and energy also are true global goods or issues. You have the same kind of challenges, irrespective if you live in Texas or in Burkina Faso when it comes to energy and water. Of course, you need different maybe technical solutions to handle the challenges, but on water you have droughts and floods and scarcity coming up wherever you are in the world. And on energy, of course, it's the same, maybe on different dimensions and level, but that is in common. And I think that by finding technical solutions in different parts of the world, we could learn from each other, both to handle water and energy. So that is also in common in energy production and in water supply. That was in common. Now the asymmetries, and they are many, but I will focus on institutional, technical, and economic asymmetries. And start with institutional, and there is quite a wide gap in between the energy and water sectors. Energy, it's it's going to be mainly privately distributed and privately owned and privately also organized. And here you have nationwide, regional, global companies providing energy. oil companies. You have in this area of the world, in the Baltic area states, we have a common electricity network between Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Sweden, the Baltic states, etc. So it's a common pool of electricity. And of course, in that sense also we have pricing set on a global market. So energy is very cross-border. You handle it on a global market, regional market, etc. So that is an institutional feature which is quite different from the water, which is still mainly public, utility run. You have local utilities supplying water in the local market, and sometimes maybe semi-local. But that's a huge difference in providing energy and providing water. On technical side, the scarcity of energy, or the increased demand, I will rather say, has led to huge technical advancements in energy efficiency. I think all over the world nowadays you calculate what kind of the fuel consumption in your car. That wasn't the case 20 years ago. You also need, you're asking for household appliances, how much energy does this refrigerator consume, etc. So you are very well aware of the energy use by your appliance or by your car or by transport means, etc. And also in production plants also, because energy is such a huge costs in most production and manufacturing industry. So that has led to an increase in energy efficiency. Today we produce more with less energy than we did some 20, 25 years ago. That is still to be done in the water sector. Of course, things are happening here, and as we heard yesterday, our Stockholm Industry Water Award prize Netafim with the drip and micro-irrigation schemes. So it's in the coming, but far beyond still what is happening on the energy markets. And still we are not aware of, in most places of the world, the consumption of water in our households, what it means, etc., for costing, also in appliances that we use. It's coming, I will say, in different parts of the world, but still far beyond what is happening on the energy sector. And economically, the third feature, which I think is a key asymmetry between the water and energy sector, is that energy is set pricing on a global market. It's basically, as I mentioned, the privately run companies that have it, and it's priced on the market. Well, here you can, in our country, you can calculate hour by hour what you consume and the energy cost. And as I mentioned on transport, you know exactly what kind of the cost is and what the amount of energy you use. So pricing has led also in the increased demand to a awareness of the cost of not only for households, but also, of course, mainly in the manufacturing industry. While water is, cost-sharing pricing, or cost coverage pricing, I mean, and the marginal cost pricing, which is quite different from the energy sector, which is more or less on the demand-supply curve. And we have local markets. In Sweden, I think each municipality has its own water utility, some 280s, compared to, on the energy side, we have 4 or 5 giants, the E.ON, Vattenfall, and some others. So there's a huge asymmetry there in the market basic structure. And my question now is, what will happen in the next few years? Do we see a merger? Do we see that the water sector is coming close to the energy sector when it comes to institutional, technical, and economic solutions? And now I'm very much into the guesstimates of what will happen in the next few years, and that is what I would like also to discuss with you in the years to come, but also, of course, today in this panel. Well, I guess, and this is my guess or estimate right now, that on the technology side, yes, I think there will be huge increases in more water efficient use of, or efficient use of water in the years to come. We have seen it into coming and in the making. On the economic side, yes, I guess that sooner or later we will see some pricing on water. That is what I hear from manufacturing industry and also from agriculture and from other sectors, that pricing will drive innovation. Also, with the scarcity, with the increased demand, there will need to be some valuation. How pricing is done, that is a $1,000 million question, whether it's tariffs, taxes, or quotas, regulations, or pricing on the market, ownership, etc. But I see more and more of demand and a need for pricing to drive the efficiency that is needed in water. But still some years to come. Institutional, I'm a bit less sure that we will see global water production or water supplying companies, the Exxon of water, but well, you don't know yet. You cannot speculate what will happen 20 or 30 years from now, but I guess more and more we will see at least sub-national, maybe national companies taking care and not supplying water, and more of pricing and more of technology advancement in the water sector. And of course, that will also impact energy, because water is a huge part also of energy production, so that in turn will lead to more energy efficiency in the years to come. That was my speculation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Torgny, for pointing us forward and trying to sort of look behind the curve. I particularly like your idea of looking at asymmetries, because a lot of times when we're discussing the nexus and interlinkages, we're interested more on the commonalities, but I think there are some stark differences as well. Another one I would point to is that the investment that's expected in the energy sector over the next 20 years is about $25 trillion, and we don't have anywhere near that coming into the water arena, so to speak. So we will look forward to this discussion to continue around the asymmetries. Our next panelist is Mr. John Payne, who's representing UNIDO, but also works with the private sector in SNC Lavalin. So, John, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Adele and UN-Water for putting this together. I'm going to make a few observations on behalf of UNIDO on some of the findings and messages about the relationship of water and energy within industry. In this context, the focus is manufacturing and extractive industries, not the power generating industry or agriculture, which are generally treated separately. So while industry uses only 19% of all the water withdrawals worldwide, one estimate suggests that the combined direct consumption of 5 of the large food and beverage companies is enough to provide the basic daily water needs of the world's population. So that's quite a thought. In that context, I guess the first message is that industry has a different position and priorities. Industry is primarily focused on production. Its interest is to secure water and energy at the lowest price, not necessarily in a program of water and energy efficiency. Industry is interested in measuring the total cost-benefit effects of efficiency on profitability, whereas governments and civil society are more focused on overall economic results, social benefits, and the environment. This having been said, manufacturing has traditionally been thought of in terms of mass employment, but now, quoting McKinsey, it's a critical driver of innovation, productivity, and competitiveness. And as such, policymakers need to understand the diversity of industry and its position in the wider national and regional economy. And on top of that, the private management structure of industry gives it flexibility to effect changes, and these changes can be rapid. So the second point is that water and energy relate differently within industry than within other sectors. Industry's direct interaction with water and energy is primarily at a plant or factory level, which is end use. More sophisticated corporations will consider the value chain upstream and downstream, and here water energy linkages such as embedded water may be more apparent and significant, and there's been quite a bit of discussion on this point in other seminars at the event this week. In industry as a whole, though, there seems to be less of a nexus between water and energy than in other spheres. Industry does not commonly evaluate the link between water and energy. They're generally managed separately and treated as two independent components and production costs within a process. So it's more of an association that is linked to profit and loss. You kind of audit one of them and maybe save some in the other. So this is rather different than the direct connection in power production or municipal engineering, where there are more obvious combined efficiencies. However, again, this being said, industry does not seek water and energy, does seek water and energy efficiency. And though the two are not always compatible, there are trade-offs that can be made. Efficiency that translates to reduced water and energy use in a plant also has the potential to reduce water and energy stress outside the factory walls. This can happen in the communities and river basins where industry operates, and it also can act as ripple effects back up the supply chain, including the power supply. There are strong differences between large companies, particularly multinationals, and small and medium enterprises, or SMEs. Large industry is well advanced in reacting to water and energy issues. Such large companies see the value in efficiencies in both monetary and societal terms. Small and medium enterprises as a group have the potential for making a significant impact on water and energy efficiencies, but that impact is mostly apparent on a local scale, and they're commonly in need of equity and have fewer resources to improve efficiencies. In a parallel way, there are large differences between developed and developing countries. Globally, manufacturing output continues to grow in advanced economies by about 2.7% annually, and by about 7.4% in large developing economies. Energy demand is increasing more than in non-OECD countries. In fact, in developing countries, the industrial sector frequently requires more than 50% of energy supply, thus creating economic stress. And water demand is also increasing, particularly in the BRICS countries in Asia. So what are the forces affecting water and energy in industry? Water and energy need to compete for priority in the decision-making process for industrial location. And this is not just with each other in terms of scarcity and allocation and so on that we've heard so much about, but also with other factors such as labor costs, availability of skilled labor, access to raw materials, markets, suppliers, transportation, infrastructure, and centers of innovation. In terms of prices, it's more the volatility in energy prices than the availability of energy that affects industry. And the reverse is somewhat true for water. It's the availability of water that is the bigger risk, as the price is generally low and stable, though I know there are arguments around that point. The most recent driver is the emphasis on climate change, where a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions is strongly linked to energy use and efficiency. Water use and efficiency opportunities are now following suit, driven in part by climate change and the projected scarcity of water resources. Regulation is also becoming more global. Energy regulation is more directed at energy production and distribution than for its use in industry. But for water resources, the contrast is that regulation generally concerns use and discharge, which has impacts on industry. There is also the fact that better use of energy and water in lower income countries may be the indirect beneficial result of regulations in developed countries with markets and companies that are subject to higher environmental standards. It is also recognized by industry that regulation will shape water economics and that regulators' preferences can tilt responses, and the same is also likely true for energy. So this plays off in opportunities and trade-offs. Industry must consider the full range of inputs and the trade-offs between where products are produced and where they're sold. In most cases, the main trade-offs are whether energy savings trump water savings or vice versa, and whether gaining an improvement in water at the expense of energy or vice versa. This is where water productivity intersects with energy efficiency. However, there is also a rebound effect in that although energy efficiency means the same production can be delivered with less energy, in fact, more can be produced with the same amount of energy, and the same effect can be true for water. So for industry, new and developing technology is readily available to improve water productivity and energy efficiency. I'm sure you've all heard about reuse and recycling and reclaimed municipal wastewater and a focus on zero discharge technologies. And Christian has already mentioned the adoption of green technologies within industry for sustainable development. And for small and medium enterprises in particular, and I feel we haven't heard a lot about those this week, UNIDO has set up a national cleaner production program with centers promoting cleaner production practices worldwide. They also have a test program, which is an acronym for Transfer of Environmentally Sound Technologies to these small and medium enterprises. Moreover, industrial policy has been addressed in terms of target setting agreements, energy management standards, and system optimization. And on top of this, companies can carry out water and energy audits and calculate balances and corresponding footprints. And these are important first steps in setting conservation and efficiency goals and targets. And of course, companies are adopting standards such as ISO 14000 for the environment, 5000 for energy management, and LEED for energy and environmental design. These trade-offs highlight the need for balanced optimization. They frequently involve short-term cost increases versus capital investments, which may be perceived as high and risky in the light of longer-term gains, such as low operation and maintenance costs. Capital for investment is frequently limited in industry, and they may choose to expand capacity to generate more revenue rather than improve efficiency. Notwithstanding this, it's been found that many investments in water productivity show positive results in as little as 3 years. Trade-offs may also be difficult to see in monetary terms, such as a return on investment. For when a company adopts new paradigms of corporate social responsibility and commits to cleaner production and sustainability, the results can be intangible. It's somewhat like goodwill. So within industry, like government, those managers responsible for water and energy need to sit down and coordinate their strategies and actions, and also talk to their colleagues and counterparts in other parts of that production enterprise to see how they may do things more efficiently and effectively. And finally, many organizations such as WWF, the UN CEO Water Mandate, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and the Alliance for Water Stewardship are working to increase the awareness, leadership, and engagement of the private sector so that companies more fully consider the physical, regulatory, and reputational risks that they face. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John, for these comprehensive comments. This is actually leading us to a very rich discussion because you're now talking about competition for prioritization, perhaps sometimes between water and energy, and you emphasized a number of times the focus on increasing efficiencies in the two arenas. So we will certainly come back to that and discuss those in more detail. Let's change gears a little bit. Our next panelist is Mr. Bhushan Taludar. He's with UN Habitat and is based in Nepal. So perhaps, Bhushan, you can take us in the direction of urban water energy nexus. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. As we move from industry to cities, I think it'll be appropriate if I take you on a small trip to a few of the cities around the world. I'll start from Kathmandu. That's where I come from, and a city that I'm most familiar with. How many of you have been to Kathmandu? Oh, quite a few. It's more than I imagined. If you've been to Kathmandu, probably the first thing you'll realize is that there's a water shortage. Well, maybe not. If you're going to staying in a 5-star hotel, you'll get all the water you want. But for the residents, the water demand is 3 times the water supply. That's in the dry season. Of course, residents have lived to adapt with this. They take fewer showers, so you may find them dirty at times. I know of friends who just wash the collar of their shirt so that they don't have to wash the whole shirt. But it makes life a little bit difficult. But what makes life more difficult is that Kathmandu also suffers from up to 14 hours of load shedding a day. Now, load shedding means scheduled power cuts. Of course, on top of that, there are unscheduled power cuts. That makes life quite difficult if you want to work in an office or if you want to operate your water pump. As a result, people are waking up 2 in the morning, depending on what their load shedding schedule is, to pump water. And the main wastewater treatment plant in Kathmandu doesn't function because it can't pay its electricity bill, if it gets electricity at all. And diesel is too expensive. We have to import all our petroleum from India, and operating a diesel set just doesn't cut it. With all that happening, Kathmandu still continues to grow at around 5% a year, one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in South Asia. What's happening? Kathmandu is not unique. This is a scenario that you will see in many developing country cities around the world. We've all heard the figures. Urbanization happening rapidly. Half the world lives in cities now. By 2050, that'll be 2/3. 200,000 people being added to cities every day. That's about one every half a second. All of these are putting increasing demand on water and energy, particularly in developing countries where more than 90% of this urbanization is happening. Developing countries will increasingly face problems with water and energy. And cities are having to go further away or deeper down in search of water. And with that, their energy bill goes up, up, and up. Jodhpur, a city in India, gets its water from Indira Gandhi Canal, which is 200 kilometers away. It has to pump water from the canal and then transport 200 kilometers. As a result, its electricity bill is about 70% of its total costs. And with increasing modernization, increasing economic growth, the water demand will continue to grow, as we know. But some cities have shown that this growth in water demand, together with economic growth, does not have to be a linear relationship. You can control that growth. New York City, for example, 1980s, its water demand, per capita water demand per day, was around 800 liters per capita per day. After a couple of decades, they had managed to lower that to 480 liters per capita per day. Singapore is much more efficient. There, the demand is only about 300 liters per capita per day. Compare that to Kuala Lumpur, 500, or Guangzhou, both 500 plus liters per capita. Clearly, these cities are showing that you can put the brakes on increasing water demand. But you have to be smart about it. Water demand and energy, as I said earlier, comes together. And a lot of times, this is due to the distance, based on the distance water has to be traveled, or on treatment options. Many cities are also finding that increasingly, relatively clean water is difficult to find. So then you have to go to expensive technologies such as desalination, which we all know is very energy intensive. A desalination of water is about 10 times more energy intensive than most freshwater treatment technologies. And in some places, like Sweden where we are, it's not just the transportation or the treatment, it's the heating. Professor Olsen has done calculations that show that the cost of heating water is almost 100 times more than the cost of transportation of water, collection and transportation of water here in Sweden. So there are all these challenges facing cities. What do we do? Obviously, it's time to rethink urban development as we know it. With 2.6 billion people being added to urban areas, what we know is a lot of the cities of the future are not there yet. They have yet to be developed, which means there are opportunities to develop cities that are smarter, develop cities that are compact, more efficient, and develop water supply systems or water and energy efficiency, build it into the system that includes an overall integrated urban water management system. And third, look at the waste. There are plenty of opportunities to generate energy from wastewater or get water itself from wastewater. And there are cities who are doing it. Chennai in India, it sells its wastewater to an industry, petroleum company, which then treats it and uses it. For them, it's cheaper, obviously, to use the wastewater. Chennai also has mandated that every household, that's 8 million population in Chennai, has to have a rainwater harvesting system. As a result, what they have managed to do is defer the need to get water from far away, and therefore reduce energy costs. Water reuse, Namibia. Okay, it stands out as a country, the most arid country in sub-Saharan Africa, but the capital, city of Windhoek, is using recycled water. Almost 30% of its water is recycled water, and it's been doing it for several decades now. Recycled water is cheaper, less energy intensive than many other options, such as desalination. Energy efficiency, we talked about earlier as well in the case of industry. In water supplies, in urban water supply as well. A recent study coming out from World Bank shows 10 to 30% decrease in energy, or due to simple energy efficient measures, which also results, and which also has a short payback time, 1 to 5 years. All of this is things that cities can do, and a lot of cities are doing it. Sydney, they're using renewable technology. They're using biogas. They're from sewage. They're also taking their sewage outfall, which has a, between the place it falls and the ocean outlet, has a head, using that to generate electricity, as well as solar and wind. And by 2020, they hope to be totally carbon neutral. Come back to Stockholm. I'm sure you've seen the nice blue buses that has biogas written on it. I don't know if you've noticed the biogas written on it, but notice it. I hear there are more than 100 of these in Stockholm, all powered by your shit. Yep, that's the wastewater of Stockholm that goes to generate biogas and the biogas buses. And I hear New Delhi is trying to follow the footsteps, which is great. Amman, Jordan, 3 megawatt generated from wastewater outfall. Again, hydropower from wastewater. And Dalian, China, which is using the thermal energy in wastewater. Wastewater is normally a little bit warmer than room conditions, especially gray water. And they are managing to recover heat out of that, which makes their system about 30% more efficient than conventional systems. So what are all these cities telling us? A, yes, there is a challenge. B, many cities are showing us the way. There are solutions as well. It's not all over the place, but there are cities that have innovated. And these cities, some of them are in the developing world and some of them are in the developed world, both sides, in Africa, in China, India, Stockholm here. We just need to identify them, recognize them, scale it up. Let's come back to Kathmandu. The situation isn't all that bad, as I had painted it earlier. We still manage to live. And there are some good innovations there as well. A friend of mine started a company last year. He calls it Smart Pani. Pani means water. In less than a year, the company has installed more than 100 household rainwater treatment systems. I don't see this friend too often these days. He's too busy. In fact, he started a new company now called Smart Urja. Urja means energy. I think he's a smart guy. But there are many such companies that are slowly starting to make their presence felt. Just near Kathmandu is a small town called Dhulikhel, where the municipality has provided a plot of land to a community where the community treats its wastewater. It has a biogas plant and a wastewater treatment plant. And the revenue generated from selling the biogas is enough to operate the wastewater treatment plant. Of course, the wastewater treatment plant is a natural-based constructed wetland type system, which means there's very low cost. But still, overall, the wastewater treatment system is quite efficient because an energy system is built into it. Again, the challenge for Kathmandu is to recognize this, nurture these, and scale this up. The options the opportunities are here for us to grasp. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhushan, for yet another very interesting intervention and sharing us with us these really remarkable stories of cities around the world. And you can be assured that we'll come back with some equally interesting questions posed to you in our discussion period. Now I move to our final panelist to bring in the UN Water perspective. My friend and colleague, Josefina Maestu, who's the director of the UN Water Decade Program for Advocacy and Communication in Zaragoza, Spain. So, Josefina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Adil, and thank you very much for putting together this panel. I must say, very complimentary and very different presentations, and I think it has made it very easy for me to make my presentation now. I think we have seen and we have heard about similarities and differences in both sectors. I think that was really nice. And my presentation is really about how we move forward. You know, not only that there exist these differences and these similarities, but how we can help for these synergies to be realized and for these differences to be somehow coped with. So I'm really going to talk about partnerships. I'm going to talk about cooperation and about partnerships between both sectors, so a little bit in line to your last encouragement on how we can work together. First of all, I think we need to understand why this cooperation has to take place between the water and energy sectors. And we have heard quite a lot about efficiency. But I think we need to talk also about security and sustainability as the key reasons for cooperation between the two sectors of activity. Security, well, you know, water is one of the key risks for the business industry and certainly also for energy. So also we know that security is important to attain the MDGs because in many countries, in developing countries especially, the fact that people don't have water, they don't have access to water, to some extent is because there is a limitation of energy as well. People may have facilities in their houses, but they don't have water every day in their houses because there is problems with energy. So the energy budget of countries is limiting the access to water and sanitation services. So that's where the water security issues go. In relation to efficiency, there are opportunities. We saw that in the industry for cleaner production. There are also opportunities in utilities for improving functioning, and there are opportunities for improving the resource management. We had in Rio+20 a call to integrate social and environmental aspects in water management and recognize the interlinkages between the different sectors. So that's why we have to do cooperation and why we have to promote cooperation. But in my view, I think we need to go beyond just the analysis of water for energy, energy for water, and we have to think about developing adequate responses, recognizing the trade-offs, as has been said here as well, and maximize the co-benefits. If we are going to move forward, we need to work on that, so look at what they are. There are opportunities, looking at the positive side rather than the differences. The opportunities for collaboration are related precisely on the interlinkages between both sectors, and these relate, for example, to policy making and planning. It's true that every domain is planning separately, that they normally have their own, even they don't have the mandates to collaborate, and that's a problem there, but that's an issue for possibilities of collaboration. Utilities, they have a lot, in spite of the fact that they are different, but they also have quite a lot in common. And they can learn from each other. We heard here how the energy utilities perhaps are much more innovative now because of the pricing issues. So there is quite a lot of room for the water utilities to learn also from the energy utilities. The industry, I'm not going to elaborate because you have done that. And perhaps something else that haven't been mentioned is in relation to regulation in both sectors. the regulatory environment for both sectors. There are opportunities to provide enabling environments and institutional frameworks that help to integrate both sectors. In terms of the realms for partnerships, where we can work together, resource planning is one of them, providing basic services of water and energy, investments in infrastructures. That has been a realm for collaboration for quite a long time, particularly in multifunctional or multi-purpose infrastructures, hydroelectricity. They have been collaborating. We have had collaborating at least in that sector. Efficient use and reduction of waste. Efficient utility management, for example, bill collection. Water and energy audits. I think you mentioned there wasn't very much, but I think there's been quite a lot of room for water and energy audits to happen together, and they have been happening together. Of course, technological platforms, that's also a realm for partnership and collaboration and environmental assessments. There are good examples of these partnerships. Many of them are happening, and they are well established in the US. Just giving you some examples. The Sacramento Alliance for the Conservation of Water and Energy Together, the Southern California Water and Energy Conservation Partnership. I think it looks like it's something that it hasn't been happening, but it has been happening, both at policy and mostly at local and utility level. So the water and energy utilities partnerships, which I had a little bit of look of what how they have been collaborating and partnering together, they have done so to help themselves in marketing, in doing purchases, in demand management, because demand management that has been mentioned here has been something much more developed in the energy sector than in the water sector. So there is a driver there to really collaborate, and ideally this water and energy utilities partnerships, when they have worked well, has been when they have not only included the water and energy utilities, but also when they have brought the local authorities, the local SMEs, for innovation in technology, and the NGOs. Some initiatives for improving water and energy efficiency, well, I think some of them have been mentioned here. In new homes constructions, there are requirements to obtain certificates. All the debate about hot water production has been very important in relation to energy efficiency. There are initiatives in commercial buildings to establish energy and water rating systems. In products labeling, there has been some important issues. There is also residential audits and retrofit programs, which have also been initiatives that have to do with improving water and energy efficiency. What I want to use my last minutes, Adil, from my presentation is related to the advantages and disadvantages of working together, and what are the drivers for really working together. So moving into action, not only knowing why we have to do these actions and where this has happened. I think the important thing about partnerships is that they are easy to establish. They can help fundraising. They can ensure complementary of skills and knowledge are shared, and they can be very cost-effective where they have been happening. There are disadvantages that, they are more fragile in terms of that there is no institutional leverage to really work together for the long term. So they may have limited life, and the issue of how long they shall live is an issue. In relation to drivers, I think the key driver for establishing partnerships, where they have happened, has been to recognize the benefits for both the water and the energy sector to work together. So the keys to success where they have been working together, these two sectors, have been always to get upper management support, to keep staff communicating, to make it attractive to both of them, and to monitor and establish pilot programs. If you throw yourself into a partnership in both sectors and you start with a pilot program where you show benefits, this normally doesn't work. So to move on the issue, to make sure that we move into helping in the Nexus, to promote it and to make sure that we improve collaboration, we might need, first of all, to demonstrate the benefits from experience, identify the key stakeholders that you also mentioned, analyze the existing partnerships experiences, and provide platforms for exchange of partnerships experience, focusing on how to making this partnership work. And that's normally much of it is a management and social issue. And just the last word is that to do that, we hope to help from UN-Water at least in two ways. One is that we have this UN-Water award that will be given in World Water Day that you mentioned, and it will be on water and energy, and I encourage you to nominate some practice for that. And also in January, from the 16th of 19th of January next year, we will have a conference and we will be talking exactly of which partnerships have been working, how to make it work, and try to move the issue in the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This was a very nice way to wrap up the panel discussion, because now you're pointing us in directions in how we can build these partnerships to respond to many of the challenges that we've just heard about. We will be soon going for a coffee break, but let me just describe the process for the rest of this seminar. We will be going into an interactive session where we will like to engage you quite directly into the dialogue and with the panelists and with the wealth of wisdom that we have. We hope that there will be a very interesting discussion. Thanks to all the panelists in terms of keeping to the time very well. We're only a couple of minutes behind our schedule. Before we break for coffee, there's one other important piece of information that we would like to share with you, and that's as I mentioned in the beginning, a teaser from the World Water Development Report, and I'm very pleased to invite Rick Connor from the World Water Assessment Program to share that with us. Rick, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Is the point set up? No, okay. Just while this is getting done, for some of you might not know, the first 4 World Water Development Reports were triannual and were released during the World Water Forums. And this has changed. And starting in 2014, the reports are going to be released on an annual basis. These will be much shorter and thematic. And so the first thematic report due on Water Day in 2014 is on water and energy. So I'm just going to quickly go over more or less the structure and to show you what you can expect in the next report, and maybe with a few highlights. So the first chapter is just setting the stage, and it has a lot to do with what Torgny was talking about, describing, the challenges, the differeces and similarities between water and energy. Energy is, for instance, energy is big business. The global energy market is estimated annually at $6 trillion. This completely dwarfs anything water-related in the water services industries. And because of this, water tends to have a much greater potential political attention. And so whereas water remains perceived more as a social or environmental issue at the political level. The next chapter focuses on water. It is the World Water Development Report, and so we report on new emerging trends, trends related to water availability, the energy, and we report on the energy required to provide water services. Here's this came out in Nature last year, and so we also try to populate the World Water Development Report with new findings that come out, and this was from Nature. And it's showing that there's more and more evidence on increased stress on groundwater. Chapter 3 focuses on different types of energy, their demands for and impacts on water, and how these are likely to evolve over the next 2 decades. There's no escaping it. According to the IEA, global energy demand is expected to increase by 1/3 by 2035. And energy currently accounts for 15% of all freshwater withdrawals. Now, this is not something that's usually reported. Usually what you get is, and I'm sure most of you know this, is 70% ag, 10% domestic or municipal water, and 20% industry. But this 20% industry, 75% of it is for energy. So we might want to think about this a little bit differently. And this is one of these slow, stepwise things that we're trying to accomplish with this report. Now, note that the scale on the x-axis is logarithmic. So again, there's no escaping it. Water withdrawals for energy are estimated to increase by 20% by 2035, but energy water consumption is expected to increase by 85% over that same period. And we'll get into that a little, but that just has to do with how water is used to produce energy. Although energy demand is expected to increase by 1/3, electric power generation is expected to increase by 70%. This has monumental implications for water. From a global perspective, the fact that certain renewables, wind, solar PV, may not require much water is actually, it's great, but it's of little consequence if you're looking at the big picture. Although, of course, these along with other renewables like geothermal can have significant local implications and impacts on water demand. But the bottom line is thermal power is going to continue to dominate. Again, the x-axis is logarithmic. So from a water point of view, the water requirements for cooling for thermal power depend on the cooling technology, of course, open loop, closed loop, dry cooling. But there's a major question of where do you want to use water in terms of withdrawals for open loop cooling, or do you want to use less water but consume it all for closed loop cooling? So it's not, there's no one solution. It really depends on your water availability and other demands in the same area. But these decisions will have to be made if you're going to reach the increased, meet the increased electricity demand. I know you can't read through this. This is just, we have 29, a data annex with 29 global statistics related to water and energy. And this we will continue doing with the annual reports that are thematic, and we'll also be putting together a database for each theme. Part 2 of the report is done by 5 lead agencies that are partners, UN Water partners, looking at more of a specific theme or sub-theme along water and energy. So we have the World Bank looking at infrastructure and financing, giving specific examples of ways that water and energy infrastructure can be combined to yield positive economic and social benefits through coordinated technical approaches. FAO took the lead on a chapter focusing on the important water, energy, food nexus related aspects. UN Habitat and Bhushan gave a nice outline and summary of what can be expected in the UN Habitat chapter on cities and urban in the context of accelerating urbanization. And John gave a good summary of what to be expected in UNIDO's chapter that focuses on manufacturing and the roles and responsibilities of private sector companies. And finally, our friends at UNEP put together they led a thematic section that concludes the thematic part of the report and on ecosystems. Part 3 of the report examines specific issues relevant to different regions, led by the 5 UN Regional Economic Commissions. Each one of the short chapters examines the most pertinent water-related issues and challenges, but from that regional perspective. And the last part, part 4, the concluding chapters. The first, chapter 15, describes more of a broad range of approaches and responses from policy, cultural, and economic perspectives. It's the idea of what you need to create an enabling environment for change and to accelerate progress. The next chapter provides many examples of actions being carried out by water and energy users, businesses, local governments, and other organizations who are actually implementing change, creating synergies along the lines indicated throughout the report. And the report concludes with a look at the role of the United Nations and the international community, the role they can play in formulating responses to energy and water challenges. My last slide, I know we're pressed for time and everybody wants coffee, so I won't get into the big detail on this, but I just want to let you know that these issues are covered in as, how do I say, in the most open and transparent way possible. So we're not saying fracking's good, fracking's bad. We're saying this is this is what fracking does, and this is what it's been shown to do. And it's still up to decision makers to decide and to regulate. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Rick, and you will, of course, be joining us in the panel as we continue after the coffee break. I know we've heard some very interesting thoughts and ideas, and I'm sure you have dozens of questions that we need to deal with, and we're very much excited and looking forward to that session. So we will have a 30-minute coffee break, and we will reconvene at 4:15 at 4:15 back here sharp, so look forward to seeing you back.